Windows 12 isn't coming this year, and it may not be coming at all, but Microsoft would prefer you keep waiting, keep upgrading, and keep quiet about what they're actually building underneath Windows 11. For 3 years now, the tech press has been promising a shiny new version number, leaked code names, internal documents, analyst predictions. And what did we actually get? Another annual update to Windows 11 with a different marketing wrapper. Here's the part that should bother you. The product they're building in 2026 is not a new operating system. It's something else entirely, and you're already paying for it. Let me show you exactly what's happening. Let me walk you through exactly what Microsoft has said publicly, what they've actually shipped, and the moment those two stories stopped matching. In 2023, rumors started circulating that Microsoft was working on a major version successor to Windows 11, internally referenced under the Germanium platform update. Reporters like Zach Bowden at Windows Central wrote about it. Leaks pointed to a 2024 or 2025 release. Then the story shifted. Microsoft stopped talking about Windows 12 entirely and started talking about something called Copilot Plus PCs, a hardware category requiring a neural processing unit capable of 40 trillion operations per second. That was the first tell. Because if you were actually building Windows 12 as a new operating system, you would announce it as an operating system. You wouldn't quietly relabel it as a hardware tier inside your existing product. That's not how software launches have ever worked at Microsoft. Windows 10 was Windows 10, Windows 11 was Windows 11, but Windows 12 became Copilot Plus, and Copilot Plus became an upsell sitting on top of Windows 11, and the version number quietly disappeared from the roadmap. Now look at what they actually shipped instead. Windows 11. Version 24H2 arrived in late 2024 as a mandatory platform update. Under the hood, it replaced significant portions of the kernel and compiler stack. Paul Thurrott, one of the most experienced Microsoft journalists covering the company for over 2 decades, noted repeatedly in his reporting that 24.8.2 was architecturally closer to what a new Windows release would look like than a normal annual update. Then came 25H2 in 2025. Same pattern. Major platform changes. Distributed as an update, no new version number attached. If you're wondering where Windows 12 went, that's your answer. It's already on your computer. They just didn't tell you. Stay with me here, because this next part is where the misdirection becomes measurable. Microsoft has been adding features to Windows 11 that used to define entirely new Windows releases. A redesigned Start menu, a new File Explorer engine, agentic AI integration directly into the shell, the recall feature, which takes screenshots of your activity at regular intervals and indexes them using on-device AI. A feature so controversial that Kevin Beaumont, a security researcher formerly at Microsoft, publicly warned about its privacy implications when it was first announced in 2024. Microsoft pulled Recall, reworked it, and quietly shipped it to Copilot Plus devices anyway in 2025. Think about that for a second. A feature that indexes screenshots of everything you do on your own computer. What you're typing, what you're watching, what you're purchasing. All of it captured, searchable, sitting on your device. Microsoft says it's encrypted and local only. Security researchers at outlets like The Verge and an Ars Technica have examined the implementation and raised concerns about exactly how local and how encrypted it actually is under adversarial conditions. These aren't fringe voices. These are the people who cover this company for a living. And here's the real-world impact. If you bought a Copilot Plus PC in 2024 or 2025, expecting to eventually upgrade to Windows 12, you already have it. You just received it as a feature drop. Inside Windows 11 with no ceremony and no announcement. If you're on an older machine that meets the basic Windows 11 hardware requirements but not the NPU threshold, you've been quietly tiered into a second-class experience. Your Start menu looks similar, your File Explorer looks similar, but the AI layer that Microsoft is building the entire future of Windows around, that's walled off behind a hardware check you didn't know existed when you bought your computer. Ask yourself, when did you agree to any of this? When did you sign up for an AI that reads your screen? When did you consent to a version number disappearing from the company's roadmap so they could avoid the scrutiny a new Windows launch would invite? The answer is you didn't. None of us did. It was done to us, incrementally, with updates marked as routine, so we'd click through the permissions dialog and get back to our work. But here's what really bothers me about this, and it has nothing to do with features or hardware tiers. To understand why Microsoft is running this playbook, you have to follow the money. And the money is no longer in selling you an operating system once every 3 years. That business model, the one that built Microsoft in the 1990s, is dead. It's been dead since roughly 2015 when Satya Nadella restructured the company around cloud services and subscription revenue. The reason you got Windows 10 as a free upgrade wasn't generosity. It was the moment Windows stopped being the product. You became the product. Your engagement, your data, your attention, your subscription dollars, those are the modern Windows business. Here's how it works in 2026. Microsoft's fastest growing revenue segments are Azure Cloud Services, Microsoft 365 subscriptions, and enterprise AI tools powered by their partnership with OpenAI. According to the company's publicly reported earnings, as covered extensively by Bloomberg and Reuters throughout 2024 and 2025, Windows licensing revenue has been flat to declining for years, while subscription and cloud revenue have climbed into the tens of billions quarterly. A new Windows version would generate a news cycle, regulatory attention, antitrust questions, and enterprise disruption, all for a product that barely moves the company's stock price anymore. A continuous stream of Windows 11 updates, on the other hand, lets them keep shipping the same underlying transformation without any of the pushback. Copilot gets integrated deeper. Microsoft accounts become harder to avoid. Local accounts get quietly removed from the installer, then partially restored after backlash, then removed again through a different menu path. This is documented behavior. Independent Windows commentators like Richard Hay at Thurrott.com and the community at Tom's Hardware have tracked every single one of these changes in detail. The direction doesn't reverse. It only ever tightens. And this is where the metaphor matters. Microsoft built the cage and convinced you it's a garden. The walls have always been there. The version number just lets you see where they were. By removing the version number, they removed the line you'd push back against. There's no Windows 12 launch event to protest at. There's no new EULA to reject. There's just a Tuesday, and an update notification, and a reboot, and now your computer works a little differently than it did yesterday. You didn't agree to anything? You also didn't say no? That's the design. When I realized this, I went back and looked at the update history on my own machine for the last 2 years. Dozens of changes. Features added, features removed, defaults altered, telemetry endpoints expanded. Not one of them announced in a way that would let a normal person notice, let alone object. If you've ever felt like your computer is slowly becoming something you didn't buy, you're not imagining it, you were right to feel that way. That feeling is data. Now compare this to what a real Windows 12 launch would have looked like. Press coverage, regulatory filings in the EU, which has gotten significantly more aggressive about operating system practices under the Digital Markets Act, formal opt-in processes for new features, hardware compatibility tools, a support deadline for Windows 11 that users could plan around. You get none of that when the transition happens silently inside a version you already own. Every protection you'd expect from a new OS launch has been stripped away, not by removing the protection, but by removing the launch. The honest version of this story, the one Microsoft would tell if it could, sounds something like, we're not making a new Windows. Because making a new Windows would require us to ask permission for things we've decided to do anyway. That's the real plan for 2026. Not a Windows 12 release. A Windows 11 that keeps mutating until it's something else without ever changing its name. So where does this leave you right now with a computer that still works and a company that keeps moving the goalposts? You have 4 realistic paths forward in 2026, and I want to walk through each one, honestly, because the right answer genuinely depends on who you are and what you use your computer for. The first option is to stay on Windows 11 and harden it manually. This is for you if your hardware is solid, your workflow depends on Windows software, and you simply want to reduce the surface area that Microsoft has access to. Start in Settings by pressing Windows plus I. Navigate to Privacy and Security, then Diagnostics and Feedback, and switch diagnostic data to the required minimum. Go to Search Permissions and disable Cloud Content Search. Under Personalization, turn off the advertising ID. Disable Copilot from taskbar settings if you don't use it. Then install a trusted third-party tool like O&O Shutup 10++, which has been maintained by German software publisher O&O Software for years, and is widely recommended by privacy researchers at outlets like Heise and GHacks. This setup takes about 30 minutes and costs nothing. The honest caveat, it doesn't stop everything. Microsoft has repeatedly re-enabled some settings after major updates, so you'll need to re-audit every 6 months or so. Think of it as maintenance, not a permanent fix. The second option is to move to Windows 10 with extended security updates, also called ESU. Windows 10 reached end of mainstream support in October 2025, but Microsoft is offering paid ESU through October 2026 for consumers, the first time they've extended this program to home users. The cost is $30 for 1 year of security updates, or it can be obtained free by enabling Windows backup to OneDrive, which is itself a data harvesting trade-off. This option works for you if you have hardware that predates the Windows 11 requirements and you're not ready to buy a new machine or learn a new system. The limitation is real. This buys you 1 extra year. After October 2026, Windows 10 is done for consumers unless Microsoft extends ESU again, which they have not committed to doing. Treat this as a bridge, not a destination. The third option is to move to a Linux distribution designed for Windows refugees. And before you tune out, I know, Linux has a reputation. Hear me out for 30 seconds. Linux in 2026 is not the Linux of 2010. Distributions like Linux Mint, Fedora KDE, and PopDocker OS have become genuinely usable for non-technical users. You install it the same way you installed Windows. You open a web browser the same way. Your files still live in folders. Most mainstream hardware works out of the box now, including printers, which was the pain point for a decade. The honest trade-offs are these. If you rely on Adobe Creative Cloud, Microsoft Office, desktop apps, or specific Windows-only games with invasive anti-cheat, Linux will not work for you without significant compromise. If you live in a web browser, in email, in documents, in video calls, in photo editing with tools like GIMP or Darktable, and in mainstream gaming through Steam with its Proton compatibility layer, Linux will feel shockingly complete. Set aside a weekend. Install Mint on an old laptop first. See how it feels before committing your main machine. The fourth option is the one almost nobody talks about, but it's becoming more viable every year. A Chrome OS Flex or refurbished Mac root. Chrome OS Flex, which is free from Google, turns an old Windows laptop into a Chromebook and is actively supported on the Google side. It's a different kind of trade-off. You're choosing Google's ecosystem over Microsoft's. But if your entire life already runs in a browser, it might be the simplest transition you ever make. Alternatively, a refurbished Mac from Apple's Certified Refurbished program or a reputable reseller like OWC gives you access to Mac OS, which has its own privacy concerns but a dramatically different business model than Microsoft's. Apple sells you hardware. Microsoft rents you software. That structural difference matters more than any single feature comparison. Budget $300 to $500 for a capable refurbished MacBook Air from the M1 or M2 era, and you have a machine that will receive software updates for another 5 to 7 years. So which option is right for you? Here's my honest take, and your situation may call for something different. If you're technical and curious, Linux is the most empowering long-term choice because it removes the business model that's driving all of this. If you're not technical and you live in Office and specific Windows applications, harden Windows 11 aggressively and revisit the decision in a year when you see what Microsoft actually ships. If your hardware is old and you just need to get to a decision point, use the one-year ESU window to plan, not to stall. And if you've been Apple curious for years but stayed on Windows out of inertia, a refurbished Mac is cheaper than most people assume, and the transition is easier than it was a decade ago. One important disclaimer before we move on. Nothing I've walked through today applies cleanly to enterprise environments, managed corporate devices, or regulated workflows where IT departments control the operating system you're allowed to use. If your machine is managed by an employer, talk to your IT team before changing anything. This guidance is for personal computers owned by the person using them. And to be clear, when I talk about hardening Windows, I'm talking about privacy and telemetry settings, not about security features like Windows Defender, Smart Screen, or BitLocker. Those you should keep enabled. Disabling them would create real risk. There's a difference between refusing to be tracked and refusing to be protected, and it matters. Now, here's the bigger picture. Here's the thing Microsoft's marketing team would prefer you never internalize. The operating system on your computer is supposed to work for you, not the other way around. That sentence used to be obvious. It was the premise of personal computing for 40 years. You bought a machine, you owned the machine, and the software on the machine existed to serve the tasks you gave it. Somewhere between 2015 and now, that relationship inverted. The machine became a terminal, the software became a service, and you became a user, in the drug sense of the word, not the computing sense. You don't have to accept that framing. That's the part I want you to take away from this more than any specific setting or distribution. The reason Microsoft dropped the Windows 12 branding isn't because they're nicer now. It's because a name release would force a conversation they'd rather avoid. About consent, about defaults, about who the computer actually serves. When you change a setting, install a different OS, or pick hardware that isn't trying to subscribe you to anything, you're rejoining that conversation on your own terms. You started this video wondering whether Windows 12 was real. Now you know it's real. It's just not called Windows 12, and it's already on your machine if your machine was eligible. You're not paranoid for caring about this. You're not a Luddite for pushing back. There are millions of people making these same decisions right now, on their own timelines, for their own reasons, and none of them needed Microsoft's permission to do it. You don't either. Whatever path you choose, harden Windows 11, bridge with ESU, switch to Linux, or walk over to Mac or Chrome OS, make it a deliberate choice, not a default. The default is the cage. The choice is the key. If this kind of breakdown is what you want more of, subscribe and hit the bell, because these stories only get more interesting as 2026 plays out and we see what Microsoft actually ships under the Windows 11 badge. Drop a comment and tell me which of the 4 options you're leaning toward. I read them all, and the conversation in the comments often ends up sharper than the video itself.